Dude. So what is up, guys? Hopefully you are all having a good day. So I thought I would talk about something that I've actually covered previously on my channel, and it is the infamous incident that happened at the Drayton Manor theme park in Staffordshire here in the UK. Here in England. So basically on the 9th of May 2017 there was a horrendous incident at Drayton Manor theme park when an 11-year-old girl who was on a school trip to Drayton Manor fell out of a boat on the Splash Canyon water ride, which was one of the most popular rides at Drayton Manor. And unfortunately, before this happened, I know what I assume it still is. I think it's reopened now, but with a new name. So obviously, the Splash Canyon water ride, one of the most popular rides at the park, and obviously this incident happened. So obviously 9th of May 2017, 11-year-old Ava Janath would attend a school trip to Drayton Manor theme park. Now, what was quite mad was that she actually, in the days leading up to obviously in the days leading up to the incident, Ava Janath had been unwell and she very nearly missed out on the trip. She recovered in time to be able to go on the trip. So they went on the trip. So she went on the trip, and there was her and her friends in a group with one of the teachers, and they went on the Splash Canyon water ride once. Didn't have any problems the first time round. So they went on a few more rides throughout the day. It got to the afternoon, and the teacher had said that they had time to go on one more ride before they had to go back to the coach. So Ava and a few of her friends had decided that they wanted to go on the Splash Canyon water ride again for the second time that day. This time around, we know obviously the facts are this time around that on the second time there was a child who didn't want to go on the ride the second time round, so the teacher had to stay with that child whilst Ava and her friends went on the ride. Now, the teacher felt that they could be trusted because they had behaved so well throughout that day, and they were obviously so she allowed them to go on the ride on their own. They also met the height requirements for the ride, which meant that they didn't need any adult supervision. Had they not met the height requirements for the ride to go on unsupervised, they would have had to have an adult with them. And they probably wouldn't have been able to go on because there was that child that didn't want to go on, and obviously if they hadn't met the height requirements, obviously they wouldn't have been able to go on because that teacher would have had to, for reasons, and it was all complicated that they got. And I remember after the incident happened, I was seeing a lot of comments on social media saying that the teacher should have been on the ride with them. They shouldn't have been unsupervised, but obviously those are the facts. There was a child who, on the second time round, didn't want to go on the ride. So obviously, you look at the events. Obviously, they were on the boat. They got on the ride. Halfway through the ride, Ava stood up in the boat and attempted to and was trying to swap seats. And as she was doing so, the boat that they were in hit one of the side walls, and Ava was thrown over the side of the boat and fell into the water. Now, the water that she was in wasn't that deep, and had she stayed put, she probably would have been okay. But she tried to climb up one of the up a travelator, up like an escalator, like a travelator thing that was used to lift the boats, like a lift, up with the lift that was kind of used to lift the boats out of the water towards the end of the ride. She tried to climb up that, but she slipped down and fell into a deeper section of the water. To be honest, she should have stayed put. Like, if she stayed put, it wouldn't have happened. Like, she would have been okay, probably. When you look at the incident, ever since that happened, obviously there have been a lot of incidents at theme parks where the theme park was entirely to blame. But this was one of those incidents where the theme park wasn't entirely to blame for what happened. At the end of the day, as this is the thing, I've seen, Drayton Manor getting a lot of blame for a lot of the blame for what happened, but they weren't really to, at fault for that because Ava and her friends weren't following the rules. Ava had stood up on the boat and was attempting to swap seats, and the boat hit the sidewall and she went over the side of the boat and fell into the water. Now, we know there was another incident like that of that same nature that happened. I think it was a couple of years before the tragedy that happened with Ava Janaf on the 9th of May 2017, where a boy actually, same exact thing, fell out of the boat and fell into the water, but thankfully he was rescued and he was okay. Didn't suffer any major injuries from that incident. But his mum did send an email to Drayton Manor. I know a lot of people were saying that the boat should have had like restraints or over the shoulder restraints, but I think the problem is, I think on rides like that, it's not really safe to have restraints because of, just in case the boat tips over, which is kind of what happened, which is basically what happened at the Dreamworld Australia, the Dreamworld theme park in Australia 7 months prior to this in October 2016. 4 adults unfortunately died after the boat that they were in tipped over, and they were left stuck and they were left trapped. They weren't able to get out. They unfortunately died. There were 2 children on the ride, but they thankfully survived and were rescued, and they were okay. But the 4 adults that were in the boat tragically died from their injuries, basically. Obviously, so that was 7 months prior to the incident at Drayton Manor. The thing is with this, as I said, with this incident at Drayton Manor, it wasn't their fault. The fact that Ava fell out of the boat. Your own common sense tells you that when you're on a ride like that, you stay seated. Well, on any theme park ride, you're advised to stay seated and not stand up at any point during the ride. And I think Ava and her friends were definitely old enough to understand the dangers and understand the risks of what could go wrong if they didn't follow the rules, and what could go wrong did go wrong if she chose to ignore the rules and chose to stand up and attempt to swap seats, which she should never have done. I don't want it to sound like I'm victim blaming, but maybe it does a little bit. I mean, let's put it this way, right? I think the reality of the situation is that if she had stayed sat down and not stood up and tried to move seats, she probably would have been okay. She probably would, that probably would never have happened. Had she stayed sat down and not stood up, that incident would probably never have happened. I think the sad thing is that it was only a matter of time before a tragedy of that nature did happen. Because there were, that day alone, there were 70, well, at least 70 incidents that were recorded by the cameras that day on the ride of people actually standing up in the boats. So it could have happened at any time. It was something that was going to happen because people were repeatedly not following the rules. As soon as you get on a ride, on a ride, whether it's that kind of ride, whether it's a roller coaster, whether it's, you're always told to stay seated. But it's not that you can't blame the theme parks when people are choosing not to follow the rules or are choosing to ignore the rules. Those rules, when they say when the ride employees, when the employees and the staff are telling you to stay seated and not stand up, they're telling you that for your safety. They're telling you that to keep you safe. If you choose not to follow the rules, then that's your right. Then that's your own problem. Then that's your problem. But by choosing not to follow the rules, you are putting yourself in danger, and that is what Ava Janaf did. She should have stayed sat down in the boat and not attempted to stand up and actually move seats, but that is exactly what she did. she stood up and she was attempting to move seats, which is something that you're not advised to do during the ride. And as I say, anyone with an ounce of common sense would know that it's not safe to stand up, and that you should, you should stay sat down. I know a lot of people say that they shouldn't have been left unsupervised, but we know why we know the kind of general reasoning behind there not being a teacher with them. We know that there was a child that that on the second time round didn't actually want to go on the ride. So the teacher had to stay with them. The teacher had also felt that because Ava and the rest of the kids had behaved so well that day, they could go on the ride on their own unsupervised. And they did meet the height requirements for the ride, so of course they were able to go on unsupervised. I don't. To be honest, I've always said that it should, whether his meet the high requirements or not. Maybe they probably shouldn't be let on a ride on their own. Regardless of whether they meet the height requirements for the ride or not, it's just not safe. And I think this incident that happened at Drayton Manor is proof that it's not really safe for kids to be on rides on their own because they tend to misbehave. This is the thing, when they're with an adult, they will behave they will behave perfectly. But when they're unsupervised, that is when those kids will start to misbehave because they know that there's no adult there to tell them off and to tell them not to do something. Had that teacher been on the ride with them at the time, the teacher probably would have told her to stay sat down, and had she tried to stand up, the teacher would have told her to sit down. That would never have happened, but unfortunately the teacher had to stay with that child who did not want to go on the ride. She couldn't leave that child on their own. And obviously, because they had behaved so well throughout that day, she didn't have any concerns about them going on the ride on their own. She had no reason to be concerned or to think that it wasn't a good idea, because they had behaved so well that day. As I said, to be honest with you, I just don't think it's fair that Drayton Manor have always gotten the blame for what happened, because it wasn't their fault. It's down to the fact that the young girl who died wasn't following the rules. She made that decision to stand up and swap seats, which is not something you're supposed to do. And it's unfortunate. It was her silly decision that ended up costing her life. It's her. It's her doing something. She did something that is incredibly stupid, and you should never do, and that's stand up on a ride. You're always told not to stand up on the rides, but people always choose to ignore those rules. And you blame the theme park when people are choosing not to follow the rules. You can't blame them for that. That's not their fault. That really is not their fault that people are choosing not to follow the rules. All they can do is implement those rules, and if people choose not to follow them, then you can't blame the theme park for that. You blame the people that are choosing not to follow the rules. If they're choosing to be stupid and do things they're not supposed to do, then there you go. But yeah, I thought I would do another video on that. And give my I wanted to talk about that actually. I mean, I have covered this before on my channel. I've spoken about this. I did a video not too long ago talking about the worst theme park accidents that have happened. And this was one of the incidents that I did mention in that video. As I don't think it's one of the worst, it's definitely one of the worst theme park incidents we've had here in the UK. I wouldn't say that it was worse than what happened at Alton Towers, but 16 people were injured in that incident. Obviously, thankfully, no one died, but they very easily could have died in that incident. And obviously, the Drayton Manor incident and the fact that, this was a child that lost their life on the ride. This wasn't an adult. This was a child that unfortunately lost their life on the ride, which makes the situation 10 times worse. But you have to look at the facts, and the facts are she wasn't following the rules. She chose to stand up on the ride and swap seats, which is something that you're not supposed to do. And if she ended up paying the price for that, to be fair, So yeah, I thought I would give my thoughts on that today. I'll see you for another video very soon. Adios.